everyone, and welcome to Morning News with Hobbs.
This is so surreal that I'm standing here. Already 2 amazing talks, so give it up for the previous speakers. And thank you to Mac and Dash Bash for this incredibly spontaneous opportunity. We already were talking man, we wish we could have more time to dive into all the weird things that we do. We had a rogue squirrel we all unanimously decided to name Salad at our studio.
It terrorized us for a couple months before we caught it.
We scheduled time to find the weirdest images on the internet and have a contest to see who does.
Yeah.
We applaud each other when we get haircuts in the morning. But I think we're just going to go with what we prepared for now, and you can definitely hear some more stories later on this week.
But first, we want to introduce ourselves.
Right. So I'm Eddy. I'm the creative director at Hobbs.
And I'm Nevin, producer at Hobbs.
And we're really excited to be able to do this. We definitely are bummed some of the speakers couldn't be here, because if they were, we would have gotten way more sleep last night.
Yes. Precisely more than 1 hour, But we're here, and we're going to start this morning out like we do every other morning, and that's with the morning news. So the morning news is something that we started over the past couple of years, just to be able to get FaceTime with the team, hang out, and especially spend some time, like he mentioned, giving some applause in the morning for people who got haircuts. So we want to share that with you today and bring you in for the experience. I'll pass it off to Eddy.
So we are Hobbs. We are located in Detroit, which we've heard a little mention of lately. There's definitely a buzz going on, and we're not here alone. Yes. This is the rest of our team. A shout out to Jade, who's here with us today and designed all these avatars for us. It's how we present ourselves on Slack and stuff, and they're all uniquely designed for everybody. But if you want to meet the whole team, you guys will just have to come out to Detroit and do so.
You gotta come.
You may have heard of our sister company, Gunner. So hot right now. But we get a lot of questions about, so what's, Gunner or Hobbs, or, what is going on? And the best way to describe it is sort of left brain, right brain. We are the right brain? No, the left brain. It's analytical, critical, ones and zeros, math, systems. We love it. And down the hall is fart jokes and silly pictures and a lot of talking with pew, 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 and the phew. But it's great. From the outside, it can look a lot like this. And honestly, from the inside, it can look a lot like this. But the truth is that at the end of the day, at some point in our history, either studio is just a bunch of 20-somethings trying to break After Effects in an old school building in Detroit. And definitely one that a lot of clients give us a lot of trust with, and up until now, it's been really good. So,
and you might recognize some of our work like this.
Oh, let me go back.
Oh, is that we got some missing footage going on here.
No.
That's an interesting situation. I think the best way to describe it, why, is because this is our kind of business mission statement, which is Hobbs is a team of problem solvers focused on furthering motion as a design discipline and applying principles to digital products and emerging technologies. All right, what does that mean? It's a bunch of business jargon that that sometimes we have to use because we work with big tech clients, So this is the designer's version. We want to see an animator in the driver's seat in places that are unexpected. So where we kind of net out with that is Hobbs. making this bridge.
So the reason that Hobbs exists is because we saw an opportunity in user-driven animation, an animation that lived beyond the 16:9 screen. We sort of like realized that animation that could live as code wasn't done evolving once you had rendered it. Like it was still alive and you could tweak it, you could play with it. And whether it was really small and you're dealing with pixels and icons or really big and dealing with 300 drones in the sky, the advantage really was in putting an animator as early on as the development process to really curve the expectations of what that tech could do. And it can be really rewarding, but it can also be really difficult, really intimidating, and really hard to do. But we always encourage our clients, like, hey, like, get us in on the design process way earlier. Get us in on the UX process way earlier. Like, we could help you organize and think about things that you're not thinking about that animation can communicate that maybe still, Figma file can't. Which is why we end up not having a lot to show sometimes, because like it's all heavily NDA, because it's all like being developed and kind of behind closed doors.
Yeah, exactly.
But all of this kind of leads us to confronting new tech that like sometimes is really hard to like know even where to start. And what we found is that we always end up here, which is we don't really know everything, but we certainly know how to start.
And that statement is how we ended up here, largely like Mac mentioned. And how we came to join Hobbs, Eddy and myself moving from different cities to Detroit, and how Hobbs was born to begin with, just from knowing how to start something that we might not have a full understanding of. So a group of people who love to break things open, find out how it works, and just get started. And how we usually get started is by being curious. And that's kind of our first tip for the day, and a bit of our secret sauce. Some of you guys might recognize this logo, and for us, it all kind of starts with Lottie. So for those who don't know, Lottie is a library that renders After Effects animations in real time. For many of you, this logo is an old familiar friend. For others, it might be a sworn enemy trying to get rid of those slivers. Either way, Lottie's a company, platform, and file format that's moving the industry forward and easing the workflow from animation to code. And that's something that we try to find ourselves at the forefront of. So a few years ago, we were working on some Lottie loops like these for a client when we got the question that every animator dreads. Can we get those in dark mode too? So in this specific case for this project, after kind of going in and painstakingly going in, adjusting every value on every asset, and just like we've done for many other projects, we asked ourselves the question, there's got to be a better way. And so these assets are just sitting there. They're live code. They're not After Effects projects that we're going back in and changing and stuff like that. They live as live code, ready to be changed. But we're not programmers. We don't know how to do that. We don't know how to go in and change that stuff. But we are animators and we are problem solvers. So we started a new game called Spot the Difference. And essentially, this became our new game, going in and changing the background on so many files. Our senior animator, Dan, thought to run those JSON files through a diff checker and find some differences, figure out what is actually changing from a light mode to a dark mode. That connection sparked an idea that became Opal. Let's take a look at the case study. Thanks. So Opal looks like that. You can find it online at opal.org. It became a free tool for fully customizing an animated JSON icon set. So in addition to being able to grab any one of these and change the hue, saturation, and lightness, scale, duration, all those fun stuff, to be able to make it bespoke to any developer's needs, site, whatever. It also became kind of a case study for ourselves in executing internal projects. So curiosity leading to creation and eventually kind of scaling into this full tool. So I'm going to pass it on to Eddy.
Yeah. I love Opal. I think it's so neat.
Me too.
Just like, Nevin's right. Like, it really set the precedent for a lot of the work that we do internally, and like how we break down, not just being curious, but going far as like making something with that, and something we didn't know was going to be there. So all right, so part 2 of like the secret sauce is remember your problem. Wrong button. So enter Firefly drone shows. A few years ago, Firefly Drone Shows, a company in Michigan, approaches Hobbs, and they have a challenge for us. They want us to create a dynamic way of animating their formations for their fleet of drones, making sure we're like staying within the constraints of the parameters of like flying these drones. It's a big ask, because after all, you're just kind of like puppeteering a swarm of robots. And this kind of poses a lot of tricky problems in trying to discover like, how does Firefly and Hobbs like really talk to each other? Like where do we even start with this? So you ask yourself, okay, well, what do I know? Well, I know animation. I know timing, I know storytelling, I know transitions, I know compositing and lighting, and you start to like conjure up, okay, well, do these things like make sense? Like talking to a bunch of drone guys, like I'm not really sure. But what do they know? Dang it. You're like, okay. So like, well, we don't know anything about safety parameters. We don't know about FAA regulations, ground control software, flight restrictions, drone specs, flight time. You're like, oh gosh, okay, how are we gonna make this work? And that's where you kind of have like, all right, there has to be a common ground. And sure enough, there is. There he goes. 3D. We all understand the coordinates, right? We understand 3D animation. They're always dealing with coordinates. And so we very quickly were able to like use that as a precedent for like figuring out the ways that we could actually talk to each other technically. And once we did that, it all like spiraled out from there, and we've done a whole bunch of work with them, and we want to show you that work because we're really, really proud of it. So enter drones. So we did it. We solved our tech problem. It started with 30 drones, and now it's like it keeps climbing. They're like, can you do 100? And like, can you guys do 200? And like, we're thinking about 300. And like, so it just keeps climbing. So we're like, wow, this is really interesting. So we solved that, and they come back to us a little bit now that we figured it all out. And they're like, hey, so how can we make our stock shows better? They have these shows that they'll go out and fly, and they're ready to go, and like are very easy to transport because like they don't need to be redesigned or reanimated. So it's like they're great. But like, how do we refresh them? We have we have returning clients. We've won new formations. So they're like, oh, all right, like we can do this. And maybe before thinking about it a little much, we got right back to work, because now you have all these ideas. You learned the tech, right? So now you're like, oh, there's all these like things I can figure out, and like if we do it like that, we can do these things, and like suddenly like now you're in the groove. But we fundamentally forgot to like ask one question, which is like, who are these stock shows better for? And before we really allowed ourselves to like think about that, we kept pushing further. And we were encouraging Firefly to kind of meet us in the middle and provide more capabilities for the drones so that we could grow our library of formations and focus really hard on making those ideas come true, which we did. So for example, it used to be that we could only run drone LEDs at like 6 FPS. So it's like very snappy, very poppy. And we finally convinced, like, look, you have to put in the time to get that 24 frame per second at least. You guys just heard Rachel talking about it. It's super important. And so, for instance, we get these formations that are actually like pretty still in the air, but like using only lighting, you get these really fluid effects that like appear to fly way faster than a drone actually could, legally anyways. Or like this Indy car, where we start to think about the perspective of the audience and how they're looking up at the sky, and how like when you're creating some pseudo geometry in the air and things turn, there's dimension to that. So maybe we start to like hide some of the geometry and start to mask things out somehow and actually create like a way more intense effect than like a two-dimensional image ever could. And we began even pushing our visual explorations, like really leaning into very alien or eccentric or carnival-style like visuals to give the audiences a very unique viewing experience. And this ultimately led us to shoot a music video, one that was piloted really by a mocap software and getting the singer's actual face and singing and like having that drive the animation of this giant drone head so they would lip sync to the music like for real. So, you know, we're like pushing and we're like doing all this stuff and we're like really excited and like, you know, this is great. But then we got like a really humbling reminder. It's like for like all the work that we had done and all the formations that we had made, all the things that we were proud of, there was one formation in particular that till this day is like the universal crowd pleaser every time. And that is the humble American flag. And man, you will not believe the cheers this thing gets after we threw up hours and hours and hours of work and all these perspective shifts and lighting effects. Like when this thing comes up, people go wild.
Every time.
And it's great, but like you kind of forget like, oh right, better shows for the audience. And then you realize, oh right, a lot of times they're watching drones for the first time in place of fireworks. Well, where do we watch fireworks? 4th of July, New Year's. So there's like this instant emotional patriotism that connects. And so we kind of like are always like reminded of that when you're like, oh, I got a good one now. And like, nope, just wait till the end of the show. So, you know, remember the problem that you're trying to solve, not just the problems that you create for yourself. It's certainly part of the secret sauce at Hobbs.
Yeah, and that is kind of how we came to embrace our constraints, and that's what we're going to talk about next in the secret sauce. And some of you guys might roll your eyes at like embrace your constraints. It's very hand wavy and very like you know, traditional advice. But hear me out. New constraints are what really grows your team's skills, and I think for us especially, it improves our projects in unexpected ways. Every once in a while, though, we will get a brief that says this right here. And some may love this brief. I think probably a lot of people in the crowd today will really love to get this brief, just do whatever you want. But for our team, we found that it's actually our Achilles heel. Because there's actually no problem to solve. And for a team of problem solvers, a team of tinkerers, we have kind of made a meme out of this at Hobbs, and when we see this, we really see this. And the reason it bothers us so much is because for us, we require a problem to solve, or we'll create one for ourselves. So constraints garner innovation, friction, and creativity. And what's a good example of that? Accepting the opportunity to write a talk in 43 hours. We happily accepted the job of writing this talk because we recognized the opportunity in the constraint of time. The animation industry is no stranger to fire drills, I'm sure as all of you know, but rarely is the constraint of time used as a benefit. So we probably could have given a pretty different talk if we had time to research or like design things, get client approval to show work that's strictly NDA'd for years to come, or even memorize what we were going to say. We're reading off the screen. But we were interested in what would come out of the sprint without those things. So without time, we were able to focus in on really what matters to us most as a practice, and that is our process. Just, you know, we're wrapping it up. So in conclusion, we're just some youngins up here talking about how we do things. And we found that our clients continue to come to us for our methodology. And I mean, that must mean we're doing something right?
I guess.
Thank you guys so much for your time.
I'm Eddy.
I'm Nevin, and that's the news.